All right, let's see if we are live. All right, cool. It's not telling me if we're live or not. There we go. Okay, audio is popping up. So today we're going to be going over a little bit of a scripture reading for y'all. All right, let's get this opened up and shared here. Today we're going to be reading from Daniel chapter 3. We're going to be reading verses 13 through the end of the chapter. So we're going to be reading on the King James Version. This is also on the Logos Bible software. But yeah, that's where our main focus is going to be today. Then we'll get into a little bit of a conversation about objective morality. But since we're starting at about the halfway point of the chapter, just a little bit of context. At this point, Nebuchadnezzar, king, he made it a law that whenever music plays, well, regardless of the instrument, and we'll get into the different instruments too in a second, regardless of the instrument, you had to bow down and worship a golden statue of it. Well, there were three individuals, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who wouldn't follow that. They went completely against the king's command on that one. So we're going to be starting here with verse 13 and go ahead and get started. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up. Now if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, or dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made. Well, but if ye worship not, ye shall be cast into the same hour into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was more than it was wont to be heated. Sorry, I'm not the best with King James all the time. And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their horsemen, and their hats, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace was exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then these three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, was astounded, however you say that one, and rose up and spake and said unto his counselors, Did we not cast these three men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the fourth is like the Son of God. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire, and the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose body the fire had no power, nor was a hair of their heads singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word and yielded their bodies, that they may not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. All right, so let's get back to the stream here. All right, and so there's a little bit to kind of talk about with this passage here. I'm going to dual screen myself so that I can actually see it. I'm not sharing the screens right now, though. One thing that's been missing a lot from our society is you look at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and I didn't realize until reading it just how many times their names are repeated in that passage. But you see this kind of like they understood that there was a chance that God wasn't going to deliver them from it, that God was going to allow them to become martyrs for his name, and they still went through with it. They understood the consequences that could possibly come, and they still went through with it. And another point to kind of look at is towards the end of this passage, Nebuchadnezzar acknowledges that there was definitely power behind the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the God of the Bible. He still doesn't get everything exactly right. We see this later on with everything with Daniel, but we also see this whole thing about cutting up people into pieces for dishonoring God. It's not a prescription, it's more of a description of what he decided to do afterwards, which wasn't great. And the Bible doesn't say that was a great thing of him to do. But that is one just kind of like interesting point to pull from this one. So now that we're kind of done with that element here, we're going to be getting on to our next main point for this one, which is going to be talking a lot about objective morality. See, let me get some water first, too. Sorry. All right. So, morality. Morality is that understanding of ethics, it's understanding of what is right and wrong. And one kind of common area within the world of apologetics is that objective morality is evidence for Christianity and for religion, at least. And so, to kind of give an explanation a little bit of what objective morality is, it can be seen through the statement of like, murder is wrong. Murder is clearly wrong. That's a universal truth. It's this kind of intermingling of universal truths. This is right. This is wrong. Our conscience, these things are examples of objective morality for us today. And we're going to be talking a little bit, just one kind of key point when we're talking about how a lot of non-believers today get stuck into this point of either nihilism or relativism. That's a lot of the direction your more modern atheists will go into. And they argue the point that, or they try to argue the point that morality and all this stuff has just kind of developed over the course of millions of years, and that they developed from this more of take and do whatever pleases you to this understanding that some things are right and wrong, and that it took millions of years for them to develop from this point to this point, and that's how we have societies with better morality today and lesser more, or some with not as great morality today, and that ultimately morality develops over time, and that issues become wrong and societies demonize certain issues. However, this really doesn't actually address the problem of morality and objective morality. And there are three main points to kind of go off of with this whole idea that morality just developed over time, and that it wasn't religion, it wasn't this kind of conscience or objective truth or objective morality, because that's another thing, is objective truth isn't held to by a lot of atheists, but that in of itself is a different story, because to quote absolute truth, or there's no absolute truth in of itself, would have to be absolute truth or it's a false statement. But there are several issues with this point. We're not going to get into the old earth versus new earth one. That's just a whole other topic for another day. We're not going to get into the point of some atheists argue that it developed over millions of years. We're not going to get to the millions of years point. But there are three main kind of points. Hopefully that thunder wasn't too loud for this video. That and it threw me off of my script too. Some of the issues stemming from this point that we're going to cover is one, the viewpoint of right and wrong. It still stems from religion. What we understand as right and wrong still stems from religion. our understanding of morality, things that we say are right and wrong, still stems from that Judeo Christian ethics for the most part, or some other religions or theistic doctrine. But the vast majority of it still comes from that Judeo Christian ethics because in the United States alone, or at least that's what was one of the main influencers of those values. And the second point is that from this viewpoint, if morality was still to have just developed over time, these still aren't universal truths. They're only true for that singular society. And that doesn't make anything actually right or wrong from that standpoint. And there is no actual true grounding for what is right and wrong. And if we were to follow this viewpoint of morality and objective morality and things like this, they evolved over the course of millions of years. We should have seen an elimination of this behavior in societies where those behaviors are demonized, if this actually was the case and there wasn't some other thing coming into play, something like original sin, total depravity, not exactly how the Calvinists define it, but total depravity, those kinds of things of fallen nature and conscience. So, because there is no actual objective answer as to why these behaviors still exist. Murder still happens. Women are still attacked and assaulted in societies that say it's wrong. It still happens. So, if it actually had developed over time, these behaviors, especially after millions of years, should have been eliminated, especially in societies where they were deemed wrong or incorrect or morally reprehensible. And obviously, these things kind of go from this whole point of the vast majority of it came from Judeo Christian ethics. You look at the abolitionist movement of the elimination of slavery in both Europe and the United States. The vast majority of that, the main focus of that movement came from Christians who were abolitionists. Yes, there were Christians on both sides. I would argue whether or not the ones on the sides of actually owning slaves, and especially in the United States, were actually truly practicing as Christians. But that's a whole other point for another day. And sides, this whole kind of point of, and we're going to get into this last point of objective truth and universal truth and stuff like that, is there has to be universal truth. There has to be universal truth. Things like 2 plus 2 exists. It has to be 4. There has to be this kind of understanding of objective truth. So to say there is no objective truths in the world, which is one common thing that a lot of atheists try to hold to, it just doesn't work because there has to be. And if you say the statement, there is no such thing as universal truth, that in and of itself would have to be a universal truth in order for it to be real. So it's a self kind of contradictory statement. So that's kind of one thing whenever you're looking at these arguments that atheists try to throw out there of, well, this and this and this and this, or, well, this is just how it developed over time. You got to look for, well, that doesn't make sense because this should have happened then. Or, well, there's a self-contradictory point in that one, or this is ironic and stuff like that. But yeah, that's everything I have for my notes. I hadn't finished. This was more of pulling from a video that I'm going to be working on pretty soon here and posting to the channel. But that's everything that I've got for it. So hopefully that actually helped and addressed some of the issues of objective morality. If not, I'd love to hear your feedback. I know I've only got one viewer really left here. If you have any questions, I'd love to see them posted in the chat. I'm going to take a few minutes to just kind of sit here, take questions, probably not be able to answer them because I want to make sure that I actually handle them with the respect that they need. Yeah. I'm trying a new setup here with these headphones to look like an absolute nerd with the gaming headset and the blue light glasses. This stream was a lot more just kind of spontaneous. So I didn't have as much time to prep for it as I probably should have, which is probably why I was stumbling on myself a good bit there. But aside from that, that's everything that I've got for y'all today. That's that's where I'm going to end it for this stream today as well. So, all right. Hope you all have a good day and God bless. Bye.